If she walked out on me tomorrow, I wouldn't lose an hour of sleep, Adric Voss said, and the men at the table believed him because it was the kind of thing he said and the kind of man he was. She was staff, a steady pair of hands that kept the books quiet and the coffee scalding. He did not cross the whole width of the city to Harlan Row for her. He went because she carried the only living key to his vault. And Adric Voss never let a debt walk out a door. 2 nights before a wedding that would knot his empire to a banking dynasty, his assistant, the one who had never once been late for anything, simply stopped answering. And when he forced the swollen door of her flat, expecting a thief, the smell that reached him in the dark turned every certainty he owned to cold ash. The vault viewing room beneath the Dumont Bank was built to make men feel small, and it worked on everyone except Adric Voss. He stood at the center of it in a suit the color of wet slate, hands loose at his sides, while a lawyer in wire glasses laid sheets of paper across the black glass table, one at a time, like a dealer who already knew the hand. The walls were pale stone, the light came from nowhere and everywhere, the flattering, sourceless glow. They used to sell diamonds and debt. Along the far wall, behind a pane of glass, a hand thick, sat the collateral. For the merger, trays of uncut stones and neat bricks of bearer bonds. The physical weight of 2 fortunes about to become one. It was the most money Adric had ever seen, assembled in a single room, and he felt nothing looking at it. He had trained himself out of feeling things a long time ago. It had seemed, for most of his life, like the smartest thing he had ever done. "Sign where he's tabbed them," said Cosima Dumont, from the leather bench, against the wall. She did not look up from her phone. Her hair was the color of cold ash, pinned back so severely it pulled at the corners of her eyes, and she wore her beauty the way some people wear a title, as a thing that entered rooms ahead of her and expected to be served. "My father wants the countersignatures scanned to Geneva before midnight. He does not like surprises, and you, lately, are becoming one." "Then he'll be relieved," Adric said. "I don't intend to surprise anyone. You canceled the tasting. You skipped the portrait sitting. My mother is telling people you're shy." A thin smile. "Nobody who has met you thinks you're shy, Adric." He picked up the pen. And then he didn't sign. Because the document in front of him was wrong. A clause moved. A figure re-nested 3 lines down from where it belonged. And the part of his mind that had spent 20 years reading ledgers for the lie in them lit up like a struck match. It was the kind of small, buried alteration that only one person in his organization ever caught before it reached his hand. He looked at the empty chair beside the lawyer, the chair where she should have been sitting, the chair where for 5 years she had always been sitting, squaring papers, catching exactly this kind of thing, sliding the right page in front of him at the right second, without ever once being asked. Vesna Locke had not answered her phone in 2 days. The fact arrived quietly and would not leave. Vesna did not go dark. Vesna was the quietest person he had ever employed and somehow never silent. There was always a message before dawn, with the day folded into 3 clean lines. Always a cup at his elbow, black and burning, appearing as though the building itself had brooded out of loyalty. In 5 years she had never been late, never been sick, and never once asked him for a single thing. She was so reliable that she had become to him less a person than a law of nature, like gravity, or the tide, something you only notice the instant it stops. He realized, standing in that cold and beautiful room, that he did not know the name of the street she lived on. "You've gone somewhere," Cosima observed, finally lowering the phone. Her eyes were the flat gray of a bank ceiling. "Is this about the girl who answers your phones?" "She doesn't answer my phones. She runs the part of my business your father is about to marry his name to." Adric set the pen down without signing. "She has the codes to the vault at the old Marrow Ironworks. She holds the only paper copy of the ledger that ties every franc your family has ever laundered through my haulage lines to a date and a signature. If she's stopped answering, she's either been bought by someone who outbids me, or she's in the ground. Neither of those is a matter for whoever you'd have handle it. Something flickered across Cosima's face. Not worry, only the sharpened attention of a woman recalculating a risk to herself. Then send one of your dogs to fetch her. Adric reached for his coat. Behind the counter, the lawyer developed a sudden fascination with his own cufflinks. If she left me today, I wouldn't care, Adric said, and he said it easily, the way you'd remark that it looked like rain. She's replaceable by Friday. Anyone is. He shrugged the coat on. But no one resigns from my house carrying the keys to my vault. That isn't a resignation. It's a theft in progress, and I collect what's mine in person. The families sit down tomorrow night, Adric. Both of them. You will be there. Then I'll be back tomorrow night. He walked out through the vault door of the viewing room, past the armed men in good suits, who were pretending to be clerks, and out into the gray afternoon. He did not know, could not have known, standing there wrapped in the warm familiar weight of his own indifference, that he had just told the truth for the very last time. Everything he said after this would be a lie until he learned how to mean the opposite of it. He would find out exactly how much he cared before the next sunrise, and the counting had already started. Rurik had the car door open before Adric reached the curb. He was a slab of a man, silent by trade, with a boxer's ruined nose and hands that could palm a skull. He'd driven for Adric 11 years, and knew the whole map of his moods by the set of his shoulders, and what he read now made him wait, engine idling, instead of pulling out. Harlan Row, Adric said, folding into the back seat. The East End, the tenements past the canal. Rurik's hand settled on the wheel and stayed there. Harlan Row is Dumont ground, boss, he said carefully. Their people run the pawn and the paper down there. We're not meant to put wheels on that street until the marriage is inked. Drive the car, Rurik. The sedan slid into traffic. Adric let his head fall back against the leather, and for the first time looked directly at the thing that had been circling him since the bank. When he'd called his head of security an hour ago and demanded Vesna's home address, the man had gone quiet, then read out a street, and Adric had made him say it, twice certain the line had garbled. He paid Vesna Locke a wage that should have set her in a glass tower with a doorman and a view of the river. Harlan Row was where the city swept the things it had given up on, a run of condemned brick along a dead canal, a place where the streetlights were shot dark for privacy and the only sirens that came were the ones sent to confirm what the neighbors already knew. Why would she live there? What was she doing with the money? What game was she running that needed a mask that convincing? The questions pried open a door in his memory he'd have preferred to keep shut, and behind it stood a picture he had walked straight past without seeing. 2 nights ago, the last time he'd laid eyes on her. She'd been at the shredder after everyone had gone, feeding paper into the teeth of it, and she had looked. He forced himself to see it. Honestly now, she had looked gray. There'd been a shadow along the line of her jaw, laid over with makeup, a shade too pale for her skin, a smear of yellow-green he had clocked and dismissed in the same half-breath. He'd asked what happened to her face, out of something that wasn't quite concern, and she'd given him that flat, dry, not quite smile, and blamed a cabinet door left open. And he had taken the lie. Because it was frictionless, because a wedding was bearing down on him, and a woman like Vesna was, by every measure he trusted, the one thing he never had to think about. He had let it go. He understood that now with a clarity that sat in his gut like a swallowed coin. She had stood 4 feet from him with the mark of a fist on her face, and he had been thinking about which cousins to seat away from each other. If she had taken the ledger to the Dumonts, if she had sold him, the law was older than he was, older than the house. He would have to put her down himself. The thought had always been weightless before. Now it came with a strange drag on it, a resistance he had no name for and did not want to examine, and underneath the drag was something that tasted unpleasantly like fear. The city changed around the car as they drove east. The clean plazas and glass towers of the money district gave way to the older skeleton of the place, brick gone black with 100 years of soot, iron fire escapes hanging off the buildings like broken ribs. A cold rain started, then meant it, sheeting down until the gutters ran fast and brown with the city's refuse. The streets pinched narrower. Rurik slowed the wide car to ease it past a burnt mattress in the road and a shopping trolley lying on its side, in a puddle the color of tea. On a door they crawled past. A child's drawing had been taped to the wood and left to warp in the wet, a crayon sun with far too many rays, blazing yellow against the gray. Adric's eyes caught on it for no reason he could name, and something in his chest pulled tight, and he looked away. "Here," he said. "The one at the dead end." The building leaned. That was the first thing. 4 floors of soot-dark brick, sagging against its neighbor for support, the way a drunk leans on a wall when his legs have quit. Half the windows were black. One on the 3rd floor had been sealed with a bin bag taped at the edges, and it breathed in and out with the wind like a failing lung. "I'm coming up," Rurik said. "Stay with the car. Keep it running." Adric stepped out into the rain, and the cold went through the shoulders of his coat in seconds. He did not hurry. He had never in his life had a reason to hurry toward anything, and he walked to the entrance with the slow, deliberate weight of a man used to the world waiting on him. The front door had no glass left, just a warped sheet of plywood nailed over the frame, swollen and splitting in the wet. He set his hand flat against it and pushed. It gave with a shriek of dead hinges, and the dark of the stairwell exhaled its breath into his face, and somewhere above him, faint and wrong and threaded through with the reek of the place, came the first thin, unmistakable trace of copper. The smell owned the building before the dark did. It rolled down the stairwell to meet him, boiled onions, old smoke soaked into the plaster, and beneath it the flat chemical sting of cheap disinfectant, losing a war it had been fighting for years. The hallway was a throat of peeling paint, a green that had started its life as institutional and ended it as something closer to illness, curling off the walls in long, dry ribbons. A single strip light guttered overhead, buzzing, throwing the corridor into stutters of glare and shadow. Adric set his hand against the lapel of his coat, an inch from the weight of the gun, and started up. The stairs complained under him, one groan per tread. The building had no privacy in it. That was the thing that struck him, climbing. Every sound of every life inside it came straight through the walls, because the walls were barely there. A television laughing its canned laugh, a kettle's rising shriek, 2 voices going in each other in a language he didn't have, worn smooth with the boredom of people who had had the same argument 1,000 nights running. It was a place stripped down to pure survival, everything unnecessary, already sold or burned, and it was the exact photographic negative of the stone room he'd stood in that afternoon, signing nothing over a fortune in stones. It was the opposite of Cosima Dumont in every way a place could be. 2nd floor, 3rd, he climbed, and he thought, absurdly uninvited, of the thing he'd said in the vault viewing room. "If she left me today, I wouldn't care." He had believed it the way a man believes the floor will hold him, completely, and without ever once looking down. And now he was climbing a condemned stairwell in the rain, with his pulse in his ears, and the belief kept slipping out of his hands. Each step took a little more of it until, by the 3rd landing, he could no longer make it hold at all, and he did with the feeling what he always did with feelings he couldn't use, set his jaw and climbed faster. 4th floor. The end of the hall, 1 door, and the door stopped him, because it was wrong. It was a slab of real oak, heavy and expensive and absurd in this rotting place. A good lock on a bad frame. Someone had spent money they plainly did not have making certain this one door would hold. And the wood around the lock was chewed pale and splintered, gouged in deep bright wounds where something had been driven into it again and again until the good door had failed anyway. He turned the brass knob. The latch didn't catch. The mechanism had been shattered inward, and the door drifted open under the weight of his hand alone. He drew the gun in one silent motion and stepped through, sweeping the room. The cold reached him first. A dead, unheated cold, colder inside than the stairwell. Colder than the street. The one window was covered by a bedsheet tacked over the frame, and the last gray daylight came through, it drowned and thin. There was no furniture. None at all. The main room was a bare stretch of scarred floorboards. No chair, no couch, nothing that said a person had ever tried to make a life here. Against the far wall stood a single cheap folding table and squared to its edges with a neatness he would have known anywhere, sat a battered laptop, a short stack of drives, and a row of his own folders. His business. Carried out of his world and hidden in this frozen box. But it was the wall above the table that took the breath out of him. Taped there, corners lined up as carefully as the folders, were a child's drawings. A dozen of them. Crayon suns with too many rays, lopsided houses, and again two figures holding hands, a tall one and a small one, under a sky, scribbled solid blue. And in the corner of each, in an enormous, painstaking child's hand, the same two letters for V. Adric stood very still. There was a number missing from the arithmetic of this room, and the part of his mind that had never once failed to find the missing number was, for the first time in his life, refusing to say it out loud. Vesna, he called. His voice came out wrong for the space, too large an intrusion. Nothing answered but the rain against the sheeted glass. He moved deeper. The little kitchen stood empty. The refrigerator unplugged and hanging open on bare shelves, the tap dry. He turned down the short hall toward the back of the flat, and then he saw the floor, and everything in him went cold and quiet at once. A long dark smear ran the length of the boards, the wide dragging trail of someone who could no longer carry their own weight, hauled inch by terrible inch toward the room at the end, and riding over the cold and the bleach came something faint and metallic and wrong, the smell of a body that had been failing, alone. For days he followed it to a half-open door, put his fingertips to the wood, and pushed it wide. She was on the floor of the little bathroom, wedged into the narrow gap between the tub and the wall, folded down small, under a single bare bulb that swung on its wire and sent the shadows crawling. For one whole second, Adric's mind refused her. That isn't her. It can't be her. And then the second passed, and it was, she was alive. Barely, and by a margin that looked like it was thinning while he watched. Vesna, Locke, had been hurt badly days ago by the look of it, and she had been trying ever since, alone, in the dark, in the cold, to keep herself in the world with whatever a person can scavenge from a place like this. She had been badly hurt, and it had been days, and no one had come. A fever burned off her in waves he could feel from the doorway. Her skin had gone the gray of old candle wax, stretched too tight over the bones of her face, and the bruise he'd half seen 2 nights ago had spread now into a whole continent of purple and sick yellow across one cheek. Everything she'd used to hold herself together was lined up on the tiles beside her with the same doomed neatness as the folders and the drawings, arranged by a mind that organized even its own dying. She wasn't holding a phone. She wasn't holding his ledger. She had not been selling him to anyone. She had crawled home, broken, and stayed that way to keep something safe that wasn't herself. For a man who had ordered deaths between courses, who had watched hard men fall on his own floors without his heartbeat lifting once, the sight went through Adric Voss like a blade under the ribs. He heard himself make a sound he didn't recognize. The gun slid out of his hand and struck the edge of the sink, and he had not decided to let it go. His hand had simply opened, the way a hand opens when the mind behind it has run out of the room. For a moment, he could not move at all. He had climbed those 4 flights, rehearsing the only 2 versions of Vesna Locke he had let himself expect: the traitor whom he would have to put down, and the corpse whom he would avenge as a matter of arithmetic. He had not prepared for a third. He had not prepared for this, the small, gray, indestructible fact of her folded into the gap beside a filthy tub, refusing to go quietly the way the world so clearly expected people from Harlan Row to go. Every assumption he had carried up those stairs lay in pieces on the tile around him, and standing over the wreck of them he understood, with a lurch that had no floor beneath it, that he had been wrong about the single most important thing in his house for 5 straight years. And beneath the horror was the other thing, the one he had felt begin on the 3rd landing, and could no longer refuse to name. He, who had stood over more bodies than he could count, without so much as a stutter in his pulse, was afraid. Not of the Dumonts, not of Ambrose. Of the sum he was working. Right now, on his knees, on a stranger's floor, that kept coming out with her, not in it. Vesna's head came up. Her eyes found him, and fought to focus. Eyes that were usually so quiet, and so relentlessly aware of everything in a room, now glassed over and swimming. She looked at him for a long wrecked moment. She did not scream. She did not weep, or reach for him, or break with relief. She looked at the most dangerous man in the city, standing in the doorway of her ruin, let out a slow, rattling breath, and let her head fall back against the tub. "You're getting the floor dirty, boss," she rasped. Her voice was gravel and cracked glass. Then her mouth bent into the ghost of her old dry, not quite smile, and stopped well short of her eyes. 5 years. You could have called ahead. I'd have tidied. Adric crossed the tiny room and went down on his knees in front of her, and the cold soaking through his trousers did not register and would not for hours. He caught the hand that was shaking worst and closed his own around it, gentle and absolute, stilling it. "Who did this?" he said, and it came out low and broken and far too loud in the little room. The voice of a man whose careful, arranged calm had just come apart at a seam he had never known. "Was there Vesna? Who?" "Don't shout," she breathed, her eyes drifting half shut. "Everything's already so loud." A shallow, careful breath. "And I need you to actually listen for once, because I don't think I've got a lot of talking left in me, and there are things you have to know, before tomorrow night, before the families sit down." Her cracked lips shaped each word like it cost her something she was running out of. "They're going to kill you, Adric. It was never a wedding, and I'm the only person alive who can prove who's holding the knife." He wanted to lift her and run. He made himself stay, made himself keep her hand in his voice, level, because she was trying to give him something, and it was costing her, and the least he owed her, the very least, after 5 years, was to receive it. "Why didn't you call my doctor?" he said. "Why didn't you call me?" "Because your doctor answers to the house," Vesna panted. "And half the house is already bought and paid for. Renko would have patched me up and made one phone call, and I'd have been gone by morning, with a tidy chart to explain it." She swallowed, her throat clicking dry. "And I couldn't call you, because if I called you with this and nothing solid in my hand, you'd have thought exactly what you thought. On the drive over, you'd have thought I stole from you. You'd have thought I ran." He didn't deny it. He couldn't. It sat between them on the freezing tiles, ugly and true. "The merger isn't a merger," she said. Each word was an effort now. "It's a funeral, and it's yours. The Dumonts aren't joining their bank to your lines, they're swallowing them whole, and they can't do that with you breathing. Because the ledger's in your name, and the vault only answers to you, so the wedding is the frame. Tomorrow night, when the families meet, you die. Something clean, something public. A rival crew takes the blame. They've already picked the Kovics for it. Cosima plays the shattered bride-to-be for the cameras. The courts hand her everything she was going to marry into anyway, and Raynor Dumont walks the stones and the bonds out of the marrow vault before you're cold." "The marrow vault can't be opened by a corpse," Adric said slowly. "It answers to my living hand and one other set. With me dead and Cosima holding my name, all they'd need is that second set, and only 2 people alive have ever been trusted with it." He stopped. Vesna watched him arrive at it, and something like pity moved across her ruined face. And one of the two already sold his, she said softly. Someone who's had the run of your house for 20 years. Someone you'd never think to check, because he taught you how to knot a tie. Her head rolled toward the wall. It's Ambrose Adric. It's Ambrose Kell. The name landed in the freezing room, and even the rain seemed to hush under it. Ambrose and Brose. The man who had raised him after his father was killed, who had taught him to hold a gun and to hold a room, who had stood at the graveside with a hand on the back of an 11-year-old's neck and sworn, in front of everyone, to keep the boy alive. Ambrose, who called him son, and Adric had spent 27 years believing, meant it. I found the trail on Monday, Vesna went on, fraying now. Money, he moved through a front that services the Dumonts. Small, structured under the reporting line, but every routing number points one direction. I went to take the physical proof off the courier carrying it. A drive and a burner that puts Ambrose and Rayner in the same sentence in plain words. Her hand drifted toward the hurt in her side. The courier was faster than I planned for, but I got the drive. It's on the table, it's all there. Adric looked at her, this small, gray, unbreakable woman who had walked alone into the dark, taken the wound meant for his whole empire, and dragged herself home to keep the proof safe rather than save herself. Why, he said, and the word had nothing of the man who ran the room left in it. No authority, no cold, only a raw and total bewilderment, the voice of someone who has just felt the floor turn to water beneath him. Why not come to me the second you knew? Why are you living like this? I pay you enough to. You pay me more than enough, she agreed, and nearly laughed, and it broke into a cough that flecked her lip. The money was never the problem. Her eyes cut, just once, toward the main room, toward the wall of crayon suns, toward the two figures holding hands. And in that half-second, the missing number he had refused to name finally, quietly, slid into place. Vesna, he said. Whose drawings are those? She was quiet a long moment, rain on the sheeted glass, the bulb swinging its slow arc overhead. Her name is Mirren, Vesna whispered at last. She's 6. She's my sister's girl. My sister's gone 2 years now, and there's no one else, so she's mine. And in our world, a child is the softest place a person has. She's the first thing they'd reach for, to make me do anything at all. So no one knows she exists. Not the house. Not you. I keep her across the city with a woman I'd trust with my life, and I pay for every warm meal and every safe night she's ever had, and I live in this box so that every coin I earn goes to keeping her somewhere with a garden. Her fevered eyes filled and would not spill. That's where the money goes, Adric. That's why I live like this. Because I would rather be found the way you found me tonight than let this world ever learn her name. For a moment neither of them said anything. Somewhere below, a pipe knocked in the wall and went still. Adric thought of the drawing taped to a stranger's door. 2 floors down, the crayon sun. He'd made himself look away from in the car, and he understood now why his chest had pulled tight at the sight of it. Some animal part of him had known, before he knew anything at all, that this cold and terrible building held something worth every wound in it. He thought of 5 years, of a woman appearing at his elbow with coffee, and dissolving again into the corners of his life, and of the whole second existence she had been carrying home each night, to a rented room with a garden, and of how completely he had failed to wonder whether the quietest thing he owned had a heart in her at all, let alone one this size. Adric looked at the wall of suns and then at the woman on the floor who had chosen this over safety, and something in his chest that had been frozen solid for 27 years cracked clean down the middle. His phone began to ring. The private line. The one 3 people alive had the number to. It shrilled from his coat, obscene in the freezing dark, and on the cracked screen glowed a single name, Cosima. Vesna's fever-bright eyes went to it, then back to him, and the ghost of her old knowing smile crossed her broken mouth. Right on the hour, she breathed. She'll be calling about the seating. Answer it, boss. Don't let her hear anything new in your voice. Not yet. Adric looked at the ringing phone. He looked at Vesna. And then he did. The thing he had not done in 20 years. He made a decision from somewhere behind his ribs instead of behind his eyes. Keep pressure where it hurts, he said, guiding her hand back to her side. Hold on, I've got you now. He shrugged out of his coat and dropped it without a glance, rolled his sleeves, and set to work with the small, ruthless competence of a man who had patched more wounds in cellars than most surgeons see in a year. He kept his hands sure and his face calm, because she was watching him and she would read the smallest tremor as a verdict, and he refused to give her one. The phone was still ringing. He pinned it against his shoulder, answered, and let Cosima Dumont's clipped voice pour into his ear, while he did what had to be done for the woman on the floor. Where are you? No greeting. Rurik's people say you drove to Harlan Row. Adric, the caterer, is threatening to walk over the head count. My mother is asking why the groom has vanished the night before both families sit down, and my father lands at dawn. Whatever this is with the secretary, it ends now. Come home. Key? Adric looked down at his own hands, at what tending her had left on them. He thought about tomorrow night, about the room already chosen, about the covert crew already being fitted for a crime they hadn't committed, about Ambrose already rehearsing the grief he'd wear over the coffin. Ah, Cosima, he said, and his voice came out terribly, perfectly level, the voice he used in the half-second before a room turned to violence. What? And don't take that tone with. There's no caterer, he said. There's no wedding. Silence poured down the line, a long, cold, spreading nothing. Excuse me, Cosima said at last, and for the first time in 2 years the polish cracked and something ugly showed underneath. You cannot cancel this. Do you have any idea what my father will do? This is signed. It's a burial, Adric said. Mine. And your father is going to learn tonight that the Marrow Vault is sealed to your family forever, that my lines are closed to your money, and that the man he sent to Harlan Row was careless with a knife. He finished what he was doing, gentle where the rest of him was iron. Tell your father the wedding's off. Tell Ambrose Kell I know everything, and tell them both that my assistant sends her regards. Adric, if you do this, if I see your father or Ambrose or one of your men in my city after tonight, he said, there will be no warning and no second conversation. There will only be me, and I am the last thing your family will ever want standing at its door. He ended the call before she could answer, closed his fist around the phone until the cheap screen cracked under the pressure, and dropped it into the dry tub, where it rattled like something small and dead. He looked back at Vesna. She was watching him with an expression he had never once seen in 5 years. Not the flat professional calm, not the dry irony, but something cracked wide open and astonished. Her eyes were wet now, and this time they spilled 2 clean lines, cutting down through the grime on her gray face. You just canceled the biggest deal of your life, she whispered, on a bathroom floor in a condemned building. For a secretary. You were never a secretary, Adric said. He finished, and did not take his hands away from her. Can you walk? No. Good. You weren't going to. He slid one arm beneath her knees and the other behind her back and lifted her, and she weighed almost nothing. So little that it enraged him all over again. How small she was, how little room she took up in the world, and how she had carried the entire weight of his life on this narrow frame. The drive, she breathed against his chest, going thin and far away. On the table, it's everything. Rurik will bring all of it, and the drawings, every one. He felt her go rigid at that, then, slowly, felt her let it go, felt her forehead drop to his collarbone. Where's Mirren right now, Vesna? Exactly, Wick Street, she murmured. Number 4, Mrs. Odell. She thinks I'm coming Sunday. She doesn't know. The words were dissolving. Don't let them find her. Promise me. Whatever happens to me, no one is going to touch her, Adric said, and he had made many promises in his life, most of them threats, And this was the first in years he meant to keep with everything he had. And nothing is going to happen to you. You don't have my permission for that. 5 years, you never asked me for a single thing. You don't get to make your first request this. Her mouth curved, the shadow of a laugh, with no strength behind it. Still giving orders, she breathed. And then she went slack in his arms, her head rolling to his shoulder. For a moment he didn't move. He knelt on the freezing tile with her weightless against him and let himself look, really look, at the sum of it. The bare room, the dead radiator, the single folding table, holding his business, squared to its edges, while the woman who guarded it starved in the dark, 20 feet away. The wall of a child's crayon suns, taped up with the same doomed care she gave everything, the only warm thing in a flat with no heat left in it. She had built a fortress out of nothing, and stood the watch alone, and he had signed her wages for 5 years, and never once wondered what they bought or what they cost her to earn. Rurik. He'd fished the cracked phone back out of the tub, and somehow its screen still lit. Come up, bring the car to the door, and bring bags, everything off that table, every drive, every folder, and every drawing off that wall. Peel them slow. Don't tear one. A pause. And nobody in this building sees her face. He gathered her closer and rose, and on the way out he stopped just for a breath, in front of the wall of suns, and looked at the 2 small figures holding hands under a sky scribbled solid blue, and understood that he had spent his whole life mistaking the quietest person he knew for the simplest. Adric carried her out, past the bare kitchen, past the wall of suns, out through the good door that had failed her, and down 4 flights of groaning stairs, his shoes kicking through broken glass, past a cracked door where a baby cried and would not stop, cradling to his chest the one person in his entire empire who had ever bled to keep him breathing. He was walking out of his wedding. He was walking into a war against the man who had raised him, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Adric Voss felt completely, violently awake. The drive back was a held breath. Rurik took the corners hard, the heavy car sliding on the flooded streets, and in the back, Vesna's unconscious weight rocked against Adric's chest. He didn't straighten her. He wrapped his arm tighter and watched the color of her lips instead of the road. On the seat beside them rode the laptop, the drives, the folders, and in a plastic bag Rurik had found the wall of crayon suns, peeled down one careful sheet at a time, because Audric had told him not to leave a single one behind. "Boss," Rurik said quietly, eyes flicking to the mirror. "Ambrose has called 4 times, says he can't reach you, says he's worried, says he wants to see you before the families sit, to go over security." Adric looked down at the gray face on his shoulder. "Of course he does," he said. "Drive." The iron gates of the estate rolled back, and Rurik brought the car under the portico before it had fully stopped. Adric was out and moving, Vesna in his arms before the engine died. "Get Renko," he said, East Wing. 3 minutes ago." He stopped in the doorway, and something in his voice made the big man go still. Then, Wick Street, number 4. A woman named Odell and a little girl named Mirren. Take 4 men you die for and no one else. Bring them here quietly, gently, and if one hair on that child's head is out of place when she arrives, I hold you responsible personally. Understand me?" Rurik had worked for Adric Voss 11 years, and had never once heard him use the word gently. He nodded and went. Inside the house rose around Adric in all its cold perfection, pale stone, high ceilings, air that smelled of polish and money and nothing human at all. His shoes left dark, wet prints across the floor. He had spent a fortune making this place look like something that could not be touched, and carrying Vesna up the wide stair, her weight limp and far too light against his chest, and the cold of her cutting through everything the house tried so hard to smell of, he understood for the first time that he had built himself a beautiful tomb. He laid her on the bed in the East Wing suite, and against the wide white cover, she looked impossibly small and impossibly gray. "Doctor." Ivarenko arrived 2 minutes later, gray-haired, unhurried in the way. Only someone who has seen everything can be unhurried. She took in the wound, the fever, the wasted frame, and her brows climbed. "This is Ms. Locke." It wasn't a question. "Adric, who did this?" "Fix her," Adric said. "Everything else waits." Renko was already pulling on gloves. "Light, and stand back." She worked, and Adric made himself watch, because he had looked away 2 nights ago, and this was the price of it, and he would pay it with his eyes open. "Her temperature's far too high," Renko muttered, running a line into her arm. "But it isn't only the wound. Look at her. She's been running on nothing for a long time. No reserves, no strength, an infection racing ahead of her because there's nothing left in her to fight it with." She glanced up sharply. "When did she last eat a proper meal? Do you know?" Adric thought of the catered lunches he expensed to the office, the rich dinners he ate, while Vesna sat at the desk outside his door, quietly running his world, and he realized he had never once, in 5 years, asked whether she'd eaten. He had assumed his money insulated her. He had assumed she looked after herself. He had assumed, and every assumption had been a small door shut in her face. "No," he said, "I never asked." "Start asking," Renko said, and hung a second bag. He watched her work in silence, and the small evidence he'd filed for years under "she's simply efficient" rose up and would not be filed again. The long sleeves in every season. The way she'd go still if a man moved too fast near her. The lunches he never saw her eat. The bruise 2 nights ago and the 1 month before it. He had taken every lie because every lie was frictionless. "Whatever she needs," he said, keeping his voice flat to hide what his hands were doing. "Medicine. A specialist flown in by morning. Blood. It's already approved. All of it. And if she needs blood and the right type runs short," he was already reaching for his cuff. "Take it from me. I'm O-negative. I can give to anyone." Renko's hands went still. She looked back over her shoulder at him, and there was something careful and evaluating in her old eyes, because Adric Voss did not open a vein for the people who worked for him. He opened veins in the people who crossed him. That was the whole architecture of the world she had spent 30 years stitching back together. But she only nodded, slowly, and turned to her patient. "Roll your sleeve down. If I need it, I'll ask. For now, sit where she'll see you when she surfaces." He pulled a chair to the head of the bed and sat, and he did not take his eyes off her face. On the wall beside her he had taped the drawings himself, one by one the moment they'd come in from the car. The suns, the little house, the 2 figures holding hands, the whole secret weight of her, fixed where she'd see it first if she opened her eyes. "Will she live?" he said. Renko didn't answer at once, and the silence was the worst sound he'd ever heard. "If I get ahead of the infection, in the next few hours, maybe," she said finally. "She's got nothing in reserve. That's the danger." It's as if she decided a long time ago that her own body came dead last. She looked at him, and her old eyes were sharp and careful, because Adric Voss did not bleed for his people. His people bled for him, and that was the arrangement the world ran on. "What she needs most, I can't hang on a pole. She needs a reason to still be here. So whatever you've suddenly decided to be to her, you'd better make yourself one." A knock. Rurik filled the doorway, breathing hard, and Adric's heart lifted and dropped at once. "2 things, boss. The child's safe. She and the Odell woman are downstairs warm." Nobody followed. The girls slept through the whole ride. "She's fine." Adric let out a breath. He felt he'd been holding since Harlan Row. Rurik's jaw worked. "Ambrose is at the south gate, now alone, he says. Says he heard you canceled the wedding, and he's sick with worry, and won't leave until he sees your face." A pause. "What do I tell him?" Adric looked at Vesna, at the drawings glowing on the wall above her, the first thing she'd see if she woke, at the small chest rising and falling too fast under the sheet. The guilt in him cooled and hardened, clean and sharp as glass, into something he could use. "Tell Ambrose," Adric said softly, "that I'd love to see him. Tell him to come in. Tell him we have so much to catch up on." He rolled his sleeves back down. "And Rurik. 2 men on this room. 2 on that child. Anyone. But I or Renko so much as touches either door, you stop them. Whatever it takes. No one gets through to them. No one." Ambrose Kell sat in the study like a man who owned it. And perhaps, Adric thought from the doorway, he had always half believed he did. 61, silver at the temple, dressed in the soft gray he'd worn as long as Adric could remember. A glass of Adric's whiskey already in his hand, poured without asking. And when he saw Adric, his whole face opened into the warm, crumpled, fatherly smile that had been the fixed point of Adric's entire life since he was 11 years old. "There he is," Ambrose said, rising, arms wide. "You vanish for a day. You cancel your own wedding by telephone. You've half the house thinking you've lost your mind. Come here, sit, talk to me. What in God's name has happened?" Adric let himself be embraced. He felt the familiar weight of the old arms, breathed the familiar smell of cologne and whiskey, and it was the hardest thing he had ever done, standing still inside that embrace, knowing what he knew. For a heartbeat, he was 11 again, the cold of the lot where they'd found his father, the way his knees had simply stopped holding him, and this same pair of arms, younger then, catching him before he hit the ground. "I've got you, boy," Ambrose had said into his hair while the sirens came. "I'm not going anywhere." Adric had built an entire life on that sentence. He had trusted exactly one man without reservation, and it was this one, now patting his back with wet eyes and asking what was wrong. "Sit," Adric said, stepping free. "Have your whiskey. You'll want it." He went around the great desk and sat, and on the black wood between them lay a single external drive. He watched Ambrose's eyes touch it, and touch it again, and slide away. "Vesna was chasing a leak for me," Adric said, turning the drive with one finger. "Stubborn woman. Got herself hurt doing it, but she came back with proof. Names, dates, routing numbers, all of it's here, Ambrose." Down the hall the long case clock ticked. Rain whispered at the tall windows. It was nearly 3 in the morning. And Adric watched the exact moment the warmth drained out of the old man's face, watched 27 years of a father dissolve, and something older and colder rise up underneath it, something that had been wearing the father like a coat the whole time. "Ah," Ambrose said quietly, and set the glass down. "So she got the drive. I told them their courier was too slow," he sighed, and it was almost regretful. And that was the worst of it. "Listen to me, son. There's still a way for you to walk out of this. Rich and breathing." "Don't," Adric said. "Call me son. You were always going to be the price. You know that, with that head of yours. Your father built something worth having and you kept it warm. But the world moved on. The Dumonts wash in a week what would cost me a year of favors. When Raynor came to me, it wasn't betrayal. It was arithmetic. A thin, tired smile. I raised you. I don't particularly want you dead. Marry the girl, sign it over. Take your cut and go live somewhere warm. And let the grown men run it. That door's still open. It shuts at dawn." "How long?" Adric said. "How long ago did you sell me? Does it matter? You taught me to always find the date the rot set in. Humor, the lesson." Ambrose turned the whiskey slowly in his fingers. 14 months. Raynor came to me at your father's memorial. The dinner, where you gave the speech. You quoted the old man. It was very moving. And while you spoke, I was doing the sums in the back of the room, and the sums said you were a bridge to somewhere better, and bridges get walked over. His eyes went flat. "You want the worst part." For 14 months I told myself I'd find a way to keep you alive. I meant to. I didn't want to bury another Voss. Then, you sent that girl sniffing, and she found the trail, and I ran clean out of ways. Somewhere around the time your courier caught up with her. He spread his hands. "So, there's your date. Does it help?" Adric didn't answer at once. He let the clock tick. He had learned patience from this man at this very desk, and he used it now like a blade turned around. "The Kovic crew," he said finally. "You pick them to wear it. Why them?" "Because they're loud and stupid and they already hate you," Ambrose said, almost fondly. "Raynor's people leave a Kovic calling card behind, and the whole city writes the rest of the story for us. Nobody looks twice at a Voss, the Kovics got to. They just settle in to watch the war that follows and place their bets." He turned the empty glass slowly in his fingers. "You want to know the truly unforgivable thing? I wrote your eulogy. A month ago. It's in a drawer upstairs. It's good, Adric. It made me weep, writing it. And I want you to sit with that, because it's the truest thing I'll say to you tonight. I meant every word of the grief I was rehearsing. That's the part you were never going to understand. I could love you and sell you in the same breath, and neither one was the lie. Both were true. That's what a man like me is." Something moved in Audric's chest then, cold and vast, and he did not let it reach his face. He had spent his whole life reading rooms for the false note, and the horror of this one was that there wasn't one. The old man meant all of it. "It helps," Adric said. "You just told me you're not the top of this. Raynor is. And Raynor is patient. He wouldn't move on the vault at a wedding. He could do quietly, so the raid isn't tomorrow night." He leaned forward, and the last of the warmth left his own voice. "It's tonight, isn't it? You moved it up the second." Thesna vanished with the proof. Ambrose's face gave it away before his mouth could deny it. "4 in the morning," Adric said softly, and glanced at the clock. It read 3:11. At the Marrow Ironworks. He told his own daughter he'd land at dawn, but he flew in tonight, quiet, ahead of his own schedule, didn't he? Because Raynor Dumont would never trust another man to carry his stones out of that vault. He's down there leading it himself right now. He pressed a stud on the underside of the desk. The study door opened, and Rurik stepped in with a shotgun held low and easy, 2 men behind him. "You always did talk too long, Ambrose," Adric said, rising. "Thesna got me the proof. You just gave me the time and the place." He came around the desk and crouched the old man's eye level, where real fear was finally surfacing. "You raised me to be exactly the kind of man who does what I'm about to do. So in a way, this is yours. You built it." He straightened. "Rurik. The cold room. No phone, no visitors, no word from anyone. He gets to sit in the dark and wonder how it went at the vault." "Adric." Ambrose's voice followed him to the door, stripped now of the warmth, gone naked and old. "You think the cage is the cruelty. It isn't. The cruelty is that you'll wonder, every year for the rest of your life, whether any of it was ever real. The man who taught you to shoot, who sat up with you through the fevers, who meant it. You'll never be certain. I've made sure of at least that much." A dry, broken sound that wanted to be a laugh. "Consider it my last gift to the boy I raised." Adric stopped in the doorway. He did not turn around. "You're wrong," he said. "I already know it was real. That's the only reason you're going to live a long, long time." And he left the old man there under the single bulb, in the first true silence of his life. He was already moving, already pulling a fresh phone, already climbing the stairs, 2 at a time. He had 49 minutes to cross the city, and one thing to collect, first, 2 floors up, and it might already be too late to ask her for it. He stopped at the east wing door. Vesna was awake. Barely, propped against the pillows, gray and hollowed, a line taped to her arm, and the wall of crayon suns glowing beside her in the lamplight. But her eyes, when they found him, were sharp again, present, furious. "You're going to the ironworks," she rasped. "Renko told you to sleep. Renko doesn't know you." She tried to push up and failed, and the failure set her jaw. "The Marrow Vault has a fail-safe, Adric. Force the door with the wrong sequence 3 times, and the whole lower level seals and floods. Ambrose wrote it into the specs years ago, so no one could ever take it by force. If Raynor's men go in swinging, they'll trigger it, And everyone on that level is sealed in for good, including whichever of your men you send in after them. Her breath sawed. The only thing that stops it is an override. And the override isn't in any file. It's in my head. It's the one string I never wrote down. Because if I'd written it, Ambrose would have found it when he found everything else. Then give it to me. Take me with you. No. You'll get it wrong, she said. It's 40 characters, and it turns on the date. And if you fumble it once under fire, you bring the river down on your own head. I've run that vault 5 years. Put me in the car with a radio, and I'll walk your men through it, character by character. Her hand found his wrist, and even now the grip was iron. I didn't crawl home half dead to have you die at the finish line, because you were too proud to let me do my job. Adric looked at her a long moment. And then he did the second, impossible thing of the night. He trusted someone else with his life. You stay in the car, he said. You do not get out. Rurik sits with you. And if you reach for a door handle, he carries you back. Agreed? Agreed, Vesna whispered, and something in her chest unlocked, because he had not treated her like glass. He had treated her like what she was. The sharpest mind in his house. The city blurred past at 80. Audric rode in front now, the clock on his knee, 3:29, 3:31, and behind him, Vesna lay wrapped in a blanket with the radio in her lap, holding back everything she had for the 10 minutes that would matter. Talk me through the fail-safe, he said. When they force it, the panel gives 3 tries before the flood arms, she said. Thin but steady. Get your men to the stair and wait. On the second failure, hold. On the third, I feed you the override, and you move in the reset window. 10 seconds. Not 9, not 11. 10. Her eyes found the back of his head. So, you keep me awake down there, Adric. Whatever it takes. If I go under before I give it to you, your men die in that stairwell. I'll keep you awake, he said, and meant it as a vow. 3:41, she said from the back, reading the clock off his shoulder without being able to see it because she knew the drive by heart. 19 minutes. Don't rush the last mile. The approach floods at the culvert, and Raynor keeps a lookout, who watches for headlights taking it too fast. Come in, slow and dark, like a man who belongs there. A thin breath. And Adric, when it's finished down there, whatever you see, you finish it and you come back up. You don't stand over it. You don't make a speech. You come back to the car. Say you will. I'll come back to the car, he said. She was quiet a moment. That's the first order you've ever taken from me. It won't be the last, he said, and she almost laughed, cracked and small and alive in the dark behind him. And that sound was the thing he carried down the stairs into the green light. The Morrow Ironworks had been dead for 40 years, a black hulk on the river, with its windows bricked and its name still ghosting off the stack. 2 floors down, behind a door that had cost more than the building, lay the vault. Adric's people came in on foot through the rain, 8 of them in flat black, silent on the wet cobbles. In the car at the mouth of the yard sat Vesna, radio to her cracked lips. Rurik beside her with a rifle across his knees. 2 vehicles already inside, Rurik murmured, reading the dark. Dumont plates. They beat us to the outer door. They're at the inner vault now. Then they're about to make a mistake, Vesna said into the radio, her voice thin but absolutely level. Adric, they don't have the rotation. Get your men to the stair and wait for the second failure. He went down into the dark with his gun up, his men flowing around him like water, and at the bottom, in the sick green glow of the emergency lights, he could see them. 6 Dumont enforcers crowded at the inner door, and 1 man standing back with his arms folded, giving orders in a low voice. Adric knew the outline. Raynor Dumont had come to carry his fortune out himself. The panel chimed its refusal. Once, the men cursed. Twice. Now, Vesna said in his ear, and read off the override, in a fast, flat whisper, character by character, and Adric's second man punched it into the maintenance panel by the stair with shaking fingers, as the third refusal screamed, and the flood began to arm. Held it, and in the 10 seconds of confusion, while the Dumont crew stared at a door gone suddenly dark, Adric Voss stepped out of the stairwell into the green light. "You're standing in my vault," he said. They turned. It was already finished. From the dark above and behind, his men moved, fast, practiced, everywhere at once. Adric's people had memorized every angle of that room. Raynor's had walked in certain no one was coming. It was over almost before it began, quick and close and final, and when the echoes fell away the green room had gone still, and Raynor Dumont stood alone at the vault door with his empty hands rising and his mouth working. "Voss. Wait. There's a number. There's always a number. Name it." "You sent a man to a woman's flat in the dark," Adric said, walking toward him. "You hurt the one honest person I have ever employed, and left her to die alone on a freezing floor, and then you sat across a table and let me sign papers with your daughter." He stopped. "There's no number, Raynor. You're not being bought out. You're being closed." "She's a secretary," Raynor spat, the fear curdling into contempt the way it does in small men. "You'd burn your father's whole empire over a glorified typist." "She's not a typist," Adric said, faint in his ear. Over the radio, he heard Vesna go still. "She's the woman who just walked you into this room and shut the door behind you." Raynor opened his mouth to bargain one more time. Adric didn't let him finish. Whatever passed between the two of them in that green and silent room stayed there, but the vault held shut behind it, and Raynor Dumont did not walk out of the ironworks a free man, or a threat to anyone ever again. He did not linger over it. He had promised her he wouldn't. He turned to his men on his way to the stair. "Send their own trucks back to the airfield, and leave them at the foot of Oswin Dumont's jet. Empty. Doors open. Keys in the ignition. And leave this vault sealed. We don't take a single stone." His voice never lifted. "When the old man lands, let him find his trucks, returned his vault shut, and his son not answering the phone, and let him understand that this was never a robbery." He looked back once at the green-lit door. It was an answer. "Boss." Rurik's voice cracked on the radio, tight. "It's clean out here, but you need to come up now. It's her." Adric was moving before the sentence finished, taking the stairs 3 at a time, his heart slamming Kudii, because Vesna's voice, steady in his ear through the whole assault, had gone silent halfway through Rurik's last word. She had gone under in the car. The radio had rolled from her hand, and her head had dropped against the window, and by the time Adric wrenched the door open, she was gray and slick and barely breathing, the last of what she had spent holding herself together through the assault. Adric carried her back into the house himself. He would not let Rurik take her, would not let the men at the door so much as reach for her. He carried her up the wide stair a second time that night, and this time she did not stir at all, and the perfect stillness of her frightened him more than any wound ever had. Renko met him at the east wing door, with her sleeves already going up, and what followed was the longest hour of Adric Voss's life. He stood against the wall where he'd been told to stand, and made himself watch her fight for a woman who had spent everything and kept nothing back to fight with. When the doctor looked up and said the word blood, Adric was already stripping off his ruined shirt and sitting down in the chair by the bed and turning his arm over, and this time Renko did not argue with him. She ran the line from his vein to Vesna's, and Adric Voss, who had opened men from collarbone to hip and felt nothing at all, sat perfectly still and watched his own blood go into the quietest person in his empire, and found that he would have given her every drop of it and called it a bargain. "Enough," Renko said at last, closing him off, pressing his sleeve flat. "That's enough. You've done what a man can do. The rest is hers to decide." She looked at his face and softened, by a fraction. "Talk to her. She can't answer, but somewhere under all of this, she can hear you." People find their way back toward a voice they know, so he talked. He sat through the last of the dark with her cold hand folded inside both of his, and said, low and steady, all the things he had never once said across 5 years of standing 4 feet from her, and somewhere in the gray before dawn, Her breathing changed and steadied. She pushed too far, Renko said at last. Straightening from the bed in the warm lamplight of the east wing room, Vesna lay small and still under the white sheet, a fresh line running, her chest rising in shallow, even breaths at last. Another few minutes in that car and I'd be having a different conversation with you. But it held. She's turned the corner. Adric, the fever's breaking. She's going to be all right, if she does the one thing she's worst at in the world. Which is rest, Renko said, gathering her bag. And let someone else carry it for a while. I'll be back at noon. Keep her away from a phone, a laptop, and, knowing her, a gun. Then there was still Ambrose. Adric went down to the cold room before dawn alone. The old man sat where they'd left him, under a single bulb, silver hair mussed, soft gray suit rumpled, hands folded in his lap with a terrible dignity. He looked up when the door opened, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The vault held, Adric said. Raynor's dead, and his men with him. It's over. You bet my life on a plan, and the plan is lying on an ironworks floor. Ambrose closed his eyes briefly. And now you've come to do it yourself. Good, that's right. It should be you. I taught you that too. Never send another man to close your own accounts. He lifted his chin, baring his throat almost gently, an old wolf who knew the shape of the ending. Go on. Then I won't beg, I've earned it. Make it clean. And Adric found that he could not. He stood with the gun a dead weight in his hand, and looked at the man who had caught an 11-year-old before he hit the ground, and understood that whatever Ambrose had killed in him over 14 months, it had not been that, not the boy who had loved him. That boy was still in there, and that boy could not put a bullet in the only father he'd ever had. And Ambrose had counted on exactly that. The bared throat was the last manipulation, a way to make his death Adric's to carry forever. No, Adric said quietly. You'd like that. A clean end, and me left holding it the rest of my life. You raised me to be a man who could do it, and then built this so I'd have to. So even killing you would be one more thing you did to me. He holstered the gun. You don't get to be my great tragedy, Ambrose. You're going to live, in a room I choose, in a country I choose, with no name, and no phone, and no house. For as long as your heart keeps going, you'll grow old, knowing the boy you sold outlived you and never came back once. That isn't mercy, it's the bill. He turned for the door. Rurik will see to it. Don't speak to me again. Behind him, for the first time in 27 years, he heard Ambrose Kell make a broken, wordless sound. He did not turn around. Upstairs, as the black sky over the city turned slowly to gray and then to the thin gold of dawn, his new phone buzzed. A number out of Geneva. He answered. Voss, not Raynor. A colder voice. An older one. Oswin Dumont, the patriarch, calling from a study 1,000 miles off. My son is not answering his phone. No, Adric said. He isn't. A silence, with a great deal in it. You have made a mistake, the old man said, very quietly. You cannot run freight without our banks. You cannot wash a single franc without us. You'll bleed out inside a year, boy. And I'll be there to buy the pieces. Adric looked at the bed, at Vesna, asleep, the bruises stark against the white pillow, the crayon suns glowing gold now in the first light. On the drive beside his hand sat every name, every date, and every laundered franc the Dumons had ever run through his lines, enough to bury them in 6 countries. I have better accountants than you think, Adric said. And I'm holding 20 years of your family's ledgers on a drive the size of my thumb, so hear the arrangement once. The wedding is dead, your granddaughter is free to marry whoever she can find, who doesn't know her the way I know her now. But, if your money touches my city again, 1 franc, 1 truck, 1 man over my line, I don't go to war. I go to the regulators and the newspapers and the 4 governments who would very much like to read what's on this drive. He let it sit. You raised a son who called a good woman a typist while she bled to beat him. Don't make his last mistake yours. Don't call this number again. He hung up. From the bed came the softest rustle of linen. Vesna's eyes had opened, and she was watching him, pale, spent, but clear. "Did you just threaten a Swiss bank with a thumb drive?" she whispered. "At dawn? I handled it," Adric said, and crossed to her. "There's someone downstairs who's been asking for you since sunrise," loudly. "She's eaten 3 of my kitchen's pastries and told my head of security. His tie is ugly." Vesna went absolutely still. "Mirren," she breathed. "You! She's here." "You brought her here?" Adric opened the door. Mirren came through it like a small storm, 6 years old, dark-haired, a smear of pastry on her cheek, entirely unafraid of the enormous men in the hall, because she did not yet know what they were, and stopped dead at the sight of Vesna in the bed. And her whole face broke open, with a joy so total, it was hard to look at. Auntie Ves. Careful, gentle, baby gentle, but Vesna was already reaching, and Mirren climbed up with the terrible care of a child, who somehow understands, and folded herself against Vesna's good side, and Vesna wrapped both thin arms around her, and pressed her face into the child's hair, and at last, after 3 days and 2 years, and a whole life of holding a wall up alone, began to cry, silent, shaking, the tears of someone finally allowed to set a weight down. "You were gone 4 whole sleeps," Mirren said into her shoulder, muffled and accusing. "Mrs. Odell said you had work. And then a big quiet man came and said you were sleeping in a castle. And did I want to come, and there were pastries." She pulled back and swept the enormous gold-lit room, with enormous eyes, then looked up at Adric, who stood by the door, not knowing what to do with his hands. "Is this your castle?" "Yes," Adric said. "Are you a king?" He opened his mouth to say no, and Vesna, watching him over the top of the child's head with wet eyes and the ghost of her dry smile, answered for him. "Something like that," she said. Mirren studied him with the frank, merciless attention of the very young. Then she dug into the pocket of her too-big cardigan and produced a folded, crumpled square of paper and held it across the room to him. "I made you one," she said. "Mrs. Odell said the quiet man was helping Auntie, so I made you a son." The most dangerous man in the city crossed the room and took the drawing from her small hand. A crayon sun with too many rays, a blaze of yellow in the corner, and beside it 3 figures holding hands under a sky-colored solid blue. In the corner, in enormous, careful letters, for the king, he could not, for a moment, speak. "You spelled it right," he managed at last, because it was the only thing in him that would come. "King, that's a hard word." "Auntie Ves taught me," Mirren said, matter of fact, already losing interest in him the way children do, turning to burrow back against Vesna. "She teaches me a word every sleep, even on the phone, even when she's tired, an enormous yawn." "She's tired a lot." Adric looked at Vesna over the child's head. "She's tired a lot." 5 years of it. A wound in her side, and a war at her back, and a bank trying to bury him. And somewhere, in the middle of all of it, she had still called a 6-year-old every single night to teach her one more word, so that a little girl in a rented room across the city would grow up knowing things. He had never once met anyone who spent themselves so completely and let so little of it show. He folded the drawing along its crease, carefully, the way she folded everything, and put it in the breast pocket of his shirt, over his heart, where it would stay. Later, after Mirren had fallen asleep mid-sentence against Vesna's side, after Renko had come and gone and pronounced them both, in her words, criminally lucky, after the gray day had warmed to gold, Adric sat on the edge of the bed, and Vesna looked at him over the sleeping child and said the thing quietly. "The way you state a fact, you finally stopped being able to deny. You canceled your wedding," she said. "You ended the man who raised you. You threatened a bank that could crush you. And you moved a child you didn't know existed into the safest place in your world before the sun was up." Her voice was very soft. "Yesterday, you told Cosima Dumont that if I left you, you wouldn't care." "I lied," Adric said. "I didn't know it was a lie when I said it. That's the part I can't forgive. I thought I meant it." He looked at the drive on the nightstand, at the crayon sun in his hand, at the small, dark head asleep on her shoulder. 5 years I thought you were the quietest, most replaceable person in my house. And it turns out you were the one holding the whole thing up. You were holding me up, and I never felt the weight, because you never once let me see you strain. He met her eyes. If Cosima had left me today, I wouldn't have cared. If you had left, if I'd forced that door and found you gone, instead of dying on the floor, I think it would have taken me a long time to understand that the reason I couldn't breathe was you. Vesna was quiet. Rain had started again, soft on the tall windows. The child slept. The suns glowed on the wall. I'm not a fairy tale, Adric said. You know exactly what I am. You've balanced the books. Our hands aren't clean and they never will be. And I won't stand here and pretend I found the light. He took her hand, the one that had held her together on a bathroom floor, and folded it in both of his. But I know what I'm keeping now. I know what I let you carry alone for 5 years, and I am never going to let you carry anything alone again. You're not my assistant. The desk outside my door is gone. So is the flat on Harlan Row. It's already being emptied, and Mirren's room here is being painted, whatever color she picks, and your name goes on the trust. Before the week is out, his jaw tightened. You're my partner in everything. And if anyone in this world ever looks at either of you sideways again, they will answer to me. And I have never once in my life been gentle with someone who threatened what's mine. Vesna looked at the violent, ruined, dangerous man, holding her hand as if it were the only fixed point on the earth, at the child safe and sleeping in a warm gold room, at the wall of crayon suns that had somehow survived the trip out of the dark. The last wall came down. All right, she whispered. And then, because she was still herself, and always would be, a spark of the old dry fire flickering up through the exhaustion. But for the record, I read your prenuptial terms with the Dumonts. Terrible deal. Your lawyer's a fool. You'd have lost the freight lines inside 18 months. Adric Voss laughed. A real one, rusty and startled, a sound the house had likely never heard. Then it's a good thing, he said, leaning to rest his lips against her forehead. A silent and absolute vow that I'm keeping the only accountant who was ever worth a damn. Outside, the rain fell on a city that had no idea its map had been redrawn overnight. Inside, a child slept, and a wall of crayon suns glowed on, and the quietest woman in the empire, the one no one had ever bothered to see, finally, after everything, let herself be held. She had never been a ghost in the machine. She had been the machine, and Adric Voss was never going to let her disappear again. He said he wouldn't care if she left. He believed it, right up until a splintered door and a wall of crayon suns showed him that the quietest person in his empire had been the one holding it together all along. Adric didn't just cancel a wedding, he burned down the life he thought he wanted, the moment he understood what he'd almost lost. If this dark, aching story got its hooks in you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes the quiet ones are always the strongest. And tell me in the comments, what was the exact moment you knew Vesna was going to change everything? I'll see you in the next one.